Daniel was one of those Bible characters who really makes you stop and think about your choices and convictions. Picture this: a young man taken from his homeland to a foreign country, forced to adapt to a new culture, a new language, and even a whole new way of looking at the world. That's exactly what Daniel faced when he was deported to Babylon. But what made him stand out? His wisdom, courage, and unshakable faith turned him into a shining example of integrity, even in situations that could have broken anyone's spirit. From a young age, Daniel showed that his priorities were in line with something greater. He didn't just survive, he thrived in a hostile environment. Think of someone who, instead of caving to the pressures of a new setting, stands firm in their beliefs. It's like landing a job where everyone expects you to lie to get ahead, but you choose honesty. Daniel didn't just choose integrity, he excelled because of it. Daniel's life in Babylon reminds us that even in tough times, faith in God can be the guiding light we need. He didn't give in to temptations or pressures, and his dedication was so evident that even his enemies recognized something special about him. It makes you wonder, how often do we abandon our values when faced with small challenges? Daniel teaches us that when we put God at the center, even the toughest situations can turn into opportunities. Have you ever felt like Daniel, thrown into an environment where everything seemed to work against you? Maybe it's a new city, a new job, or even a group of people who don't share your worldview. The key is to hold on to your principles and trust that, just like God was with Daniel, He's with you too. And trust me, He can use your life for amazing things, even when everything seems lost. Another striking thing about Daniel's story is his ability to see beyond the obvious. He didn't view his situation as punishment, but as an opportunity to serve God in an even greater way. How often do we find ourselves complaining about our circumstances instead of asking how we can grow through them? Daniel teaches us that every challenge can be a disguised opportunity. And honestly, Daniel's journey makes us think about finding a balance between who we are and what's expected of us. In Babylon, he was surrounded by temptations that could have pulled him away from God. Yet he stayed true to himself. That leads us to a big question. In what areas of our lives are we giving in to external pressures and drifting away from our values? Daniel also shows us that having faith doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. He was a strategist, a wise man who knew how to navigate different situations. That reminds me that in our walk with God, we need to combine faith with practical wisdom. It's not enough to just hope for the best. We have to act with intention. Have you thought about how you can blend faith and strategy to tackle your daily challenges? A clear example of this is how Daniel stayed faithful even in the smallest details. He refused to eat the king's food because he believed it would compromise his obedience to God. It might seem like a small thing, but it was a significant act. Sometimes it's those little decisions that reveal who we truly are. Have you ever stopped to think about the small choices in your day-to-day life that reflect your faith and integrity? Daniel's story challenges us to consider where our true loyalty lies. It's so easy to get distracted by the demands of the world and forget that our first responsibility is to God. And here's the incredible part. When we put God first, He takes care of everything else in our lives. Daniel is living proof of that. In the end, Daniel didn't just survive Babylon. He became one of the most respected men in the nation. His story pushes us to stand firm, even in the face of the greatest adversities, and to believe that with God by our side, we can overcome anything. And trust me, this is just the beginning of the fascinating journey that was Daniel's life. Imagine a young man, torn from his homeland, forced to leave everything he knew behind and taken to a completely foreign kingdom. Daniel was just about 15 years old when he was deported to Babylon, along with other nobles from Judah. It was like the life he knew had been ripped away from him. But instead of drowning in pain or fear, Daniel chose a different path. He made faithfulness to God his compass, even in an environment filled with temptations and challenges. As soon as Daniel arrived in Babylon, he was selected for a special program under King Nebuchadnezzar. The best and brightest young men were being trained to serve in the royal court. It was like getting a scholarship to the most prestigious university of the time. But it came at a price. Full adaptation to Babylonian culture, including embracing its customs and beliefs. Many might have thought, what's the harm in bending a little? But Daniel knew that small compromises could lead to big spiritual losses. One of the first challenges Daniel faced was about food. The chosen young men were supposed to eat the king's delicacies, a luxurious diet often dedicated to Babylonian gods. For most people, it'd be irresistible. After all, who'd turn down the finest cuisine? But Daniel and his friends chose a simple diet of vegetables and water, refusing to defile themselves. It might seem like a small thing, but think about it. How often are we tested by seemingly insignificant choices? Daniel's decision wasn't just about food. It was a bold declaration of faith. He believed that obeying God's laws was more important than pleasing men, even if it meant standing out in a negative way. That makes us think, in what areas of our lives are we compromising our values out of fear of not fitting in? Maybe at work, in school, or even among friends. Daniel shows us that having the courage to say no can lead to great rewards, and those rewards came. After 10 days of testing, Daniel and his friends looked healthier and stronger than the others. They didn't just survive on their simple diet, they thrived. God honored their obedience in ways no human training ever could. It's a reminder that when we put God first, He does the impossible for us. Have you ever trusted God so much that He turned something small into something extraordinary? But Daniel didn't just stand out for his appearance. His wisdom set him apart too. He absorbed Babylonian knowledge without compromising his faith. That's a powerful example of how we can navigate different cultures and environments without losing who we are. Daniel teaches us that we can learn from the world without letting it shape us. Think about your own life. How can you grow intellectually without compromising your core values? Another fascinating point is that Daniel wasn't acting alone. He had friends with the same vision and determination: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their companionship was essential for his perseverance. It reminds us how important it is to have people of faith around us. Who are the people influencing your life? Are they drawing you closer to God or pulling you away? Daniel's experience also shows us that faithfulness doesn't need to be announced to the whole world. He didn't give a grand speech about his diet or his choices. He simply acted. And it was through his actions that his faith shone. Often, the most profound impact we make comes from what we do, not what we say. In the end, Daniel proved that true strength lies not in going with the flow but in standing firm, even when everything seems to be working against you. And here's the amazing part. This was just the beginning of his journey in Babylon. He would face many more challenges, each tougher than the last. But those early days show us that it's in laying the foundation that we build the strength to face what's ahead. And speaking of challenges, Daniel's story is just getting started. What happens when a faithful young man finds himself before the most powerful king in the world, with dreams no one can interpret? The journey continues, and the lessons from Daniel only grow deeper. Imagine standing before the most powerful man in the known world, the one whose word was absolute law, and he demands something seemingly impossible: to interpret a dream he hasn't even revealed. That's exactly what Daniel faced with King Nebuchadnezzar. This wasn't just a challenge, it was life or death. All the wise men in Babylon were going to be executed if no one could decipher the dream. For most people, this would have been a moment of sheer panic. But for Daniel, it was a chance to prove that God was in control. The king's request was insane. He didn't just want the dream interpreted, he wanted someone to describe it without him saying a word about it. Who could possibly do that? The king's advisors, overwhelmed and desperate, admitted that only the gods could meet such a demand. And that's when Daniel stepped in. He asked the king for time, and then did something so many of us forget to do in a crisis. He prayed. Daniel knew the answer didn't lie in his own wisdom, but in God's. He gathered his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and together they sought God in prayer. This moment is so powerful because it reminds us that, in hard times, we're not alone. Just as Daniel leaned on God and his faith community, we can find strength and comfort in prayer and the support of others. And then, the answer came. During the night, God revealed Nebuchadnezzar's dream and its meaning to Daniel. Think about that for a second. What seemed humanly impossible was solved because Daniel chose to trust God. How often do we panic in the face of seemingly unsolvable problems, forgetting that God can do the impossible? Maybe it's a financial crisis, a tough decision at work, or a broken relationship. Daniel's story reminds us that when we turn to God, He provides the guidance we need. The next day, Daniel went to the king, but before revealing the dream, he did something remarkable. He gave all the credit to God. He made it crystal clear that the interpretation didn't come from his own ability but from the God of heaven. That's a lesson in humility. In a world that constantly pushes us to take credit for our successes, Daniel shows us that true strength comes from acknowledging our dependence on God. Nebuchadnezzar's dream was a prophetic vision of the kingdoms that would rise and fall throughout history, leading to the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. The golden head represented the Babylonian Empire, followed by other kingdoms symbolized by silver, bronze, iron, and clay. This vision is a reminder that no human power lasts forever. Only God's kingdom stands the test of time. Think about how much energy do we spend chasing after temporary things when we should be focusing on what truly matters? The king was so amazed by the revelation that he recognized the greatness of Daniel's God. He bowed before the young prophet and elevated him, making him governor of Babylon's province and chief of the wise men. This shows us that when we trust God, He doesn't just solve our problems. He puts us in positions where we can serve His greater purpose. Daniel's story and Nebuchadnezzar's dream challenge us to look beyond our immediate circumstances. So often we're so caught up in our problems that we lose sight of the bigger picture. Just as God revealed the future to the king through Daniel, He has a plan for each of us too. The question is, are we willing to seek His guidance and trust Him, even when everything seems to be falling apart? Another key takeaway is that Daniel didn't just survive the crisis. He used it as an opportunity to glorify God. That makes us ask ourselves, how can we turn our struggles into chances to show God's greatness? Maybe it's by sharing a testimony of faith during tough times or by helping others find hope. Whatever the situation, remember, God can take even the hardest moments and turn them into something extraordinary. And so, Daniel's influence in Babylon grew even more. But his journey was far from over. He and his friends would soon face life-threatening challenges, all because of their unwavering faith in God. And if you think Daniel's courage is impressive, just wait until you hear what happens when his friends are thrown into the fiery furnace. Imagine standing in front of a massive crowd, with a towering golden statue right before you, as a command rings out, "Everyone must bow and worship." That's exactly what Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, better known in Babylon as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, faced. King Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful ruler of the time, had decreed that anyone who refused to bow down to the statue would be thrown into a blazing furnace. For most people, the choice was clear: bow down and save your life. But for these three men, there was something far more important at stake. They knew God's command, "You shall have no other gods before me." Bowing to that statue would have meant denying the very faith that defined their lives. So, with a courage that defies logic, they stood tall while everyone around them fell to their knees. Now pause for a second and think, how often do we give in to pressure instead of standing up for what we believe in? Whether it's at work, school, or even with friends, we're constantly tempted to compromise our values. When confronted by the king, the three friends said something extraordinary. They declared that God could save them from the furnace, but even if He didn't, they still wouldn't bow. That's such a powerful example of unwavering faith. They weren't faithful because they were guaranteed a positive outcome. They were faithful because of who God is. This challenges us to ask, Is our faith tied to our circumstances, or is it strong enough to hold firm even when the future is uncertain? Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, so hot that the soldiers who threw the 3 men in were killed by the heat. And this is where we see the real essence of faith, trusting God even when life's heat feels unbearable. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah knew they might die, but they also knew their lives were in God's hands. Then, something incredible happened. As the king and his court watched the furnace, they saw not 3 men but 4, walking around in the fire, completely unharmed. The 4th figure, described as looking like a son of the gods, is widely believed to have been a manifestation of God or Christ. This wasn't just a miracle. It was living proof that God never abandons those who trust him. Think about it. In your hardest moments, do you believe God is with you, even when everything feels hopeless? When the 3 men were brought out of the furnace, not even the smell of smoke clung to their clothes. That's something only God can do. Not just deliver us from danger, but restore us in a way that turns our experience into a powerful testimony of his greatness. How many times has God brought you through tough situations and left you stronger, more confident in his faithfulness? The impact of this miracle was so profound that even Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged the power of Israel's God. He declared that no other God could save the way theirs did, and promoted the 3 friends to even higher positions in his kingdom. This is a powerful reminder that when we place our faith in God, he not only sustains us, but uses our lives to display his glory to the world. But the real lesson here isn't just about deliverance, it's about faithfulness. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah didn't know if they'd be saved from the furnace, but they trusted God anyway. That challenges us to think, are we faithful to God only when things are going well, or do we trust him even in life's storms? Their story inspires us to stand firm no matter the cost. Beyond that, the furnace represents the challenges we face every day. Maybe your fire is a financial struggle, a health issue, or pressure to conform to the world around you. The story of these 3 men reminds us that God is with us in every situation, sustaining us, protecting us, and strengthening us. And if you think Daniel and his friends have already faced their share of incredible challenges, wait until you hear what happens when Daniel is thrown into a den of hungry lions. Their faithfulness to God continues to be tested, but as always, God's power shines even brighter. Imagine living in an environment where even your integrity is turned against you. Daniel, now an older man, continued to be a shining example of wisdom and faithfulness to God. He had become so respected in the government that he stirred up jealousy among other leaders. These men, unable to find any fault in Daniel, decided to use his devotion to God as a trap. How many times have you seen people try to tear someone down out of pure envy? It's as old as Daniel's story, yet it happens every day. The conspirators convinced King Darius to issue a decree. No one could pray to any god or human except the king for 30 days. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the lion's den. For Daniel, the choice was straightforward. He could either hide his faith or continue praying openly to God, just as he always had. Daniel chose the latter. And here's an important lesson. His faithfulness to God didn't waver, no matter the circumstances. Daniel didn't make a show of his prayers, but he didn't hide them either. He opened the windows of his room, as was his habit, and prayed 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem. He knew about the decree, he knew the consequences, but he also knew his connection to God mattered more than any human law. It challenges us to think, what are we willing to sacrifice for our faith? It didn't take long for Daniel's enemies to report him to the king. Darius, though he respected Daniel, was bound by his own decree. Imagine the pressure Daniel must have felt, being thrown into a den of hungry lions, yet he didn't argue or try to defend himself. He trusted God, even when things seemed completely hopeless. That night, Daniel was thrown into the den. King Darius, deeply troubled and unable to sleep, fasted and prayed for his friend. It's striking to see even the king recognizing the power of Daniel's God. Meanwhile, in the den, something extraordinary happened. God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths. Not only did Daniel survive, but he emerged completely unharmed. It's a powerful reminder that God can protect us, even in the most desperate situations. At dawn, Darius rushed to the den and called out to Daniel. Imagine the relief when he heard Daniel's voice, proclaiming that God had saved him. This moment teaches us about God's faithfulness. He doesn't abandon us even when we're facing life's lions. Think about your own challenges. Do you believe God can shut the mouths of the lions in your life? Daniel's response was full of grace and humility. He didn't use his survival to brag or lash out at his enemies. Instead, he used it to glorify God. That makes us reflect. How do we handle our victories? Do we point others to God, or do we make it all about ourselves? Following this miracle, King Darius issued a new decree, declaring that Daniel's God was the living and eternal God. He commanded everyone in the kingdom to fear and revere this God. It's amazing how one person's faithfulness can influence so many lives. Have you ever considered how your faith might impact the people around you? But this story isn't just about deliverance. It's about trust. Daniel didn't know if he would be saved, but he chose to trust God anyway. This teaches us that real faith isn't about expecting a specific outcome. It's about knowing who God is. That kind of trust challenges us to remain faithful, no matter what comes our way. And just as Daniel's experience in the lion's den inspires us, it also sets the stage for the next chapter of his life. The prophetic visions God revealed to him. These visions not only shaped the understanding of the future, but also reaffirmed that God is in control of everything, from earthly kingdoms to the heavens above. Imagine being chosen to receive visions that would span centuries, revealing the fate of kingdoms and the arrival of an eternal reign. Daniel wasn't just a wise man. He was a messenger of God, someone entrusted with revelations that would shape humanity's understanding of history and the future. These visions weren't just fascinating. They were intricate, often mysterious, but always pointed to God's sovereignty over everything. One of Daniel's earliest prophetic visions featured 4 massive beasts rising from the sea. Each represented an empire: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and finally Rome. These creatures symbolized human power and its corruption, but they also underscored a crucial truth. These kingdoms were temporary. Only God's kingdom would last forever. This vision reminds us of something fundamental. No matter how powerful governments or systems seem, they're all under God's control. Another striking vision involved a colossal statue, much like the one from Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but with a remarkable twist. A stone cut without human hands struck the statue, shattering it, and grew into a vast mountain, symbolizing God's eternal kingdom. This serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how invincible human kingdoms may appear, they can never rival God's might. Daniel's prophetic visions weren't just about the distant future. They had practical implications for his time and ours. They challenge us to reflect on where we place our trust. Are we investing in fleeting things like power, wealth, or status? Or are we focusing on what's eternal, like our relationship with God? One particularly profound vision was the prophecy, the 70 weeks, a complex timeline that foretold the coming of the Messiah. This detailed prophecy pointed directly to Jesus Christ and his redemptive work. It's incredible to see how God orchestrated history with such precision. This gives us confidence that he's in control of our lives, even when we don't fully understand what's happening. As Daniel received these visions, he didn't just witness awe-inspiring images. He felt the heavy responsibility they carried. He prayed fervently, seeking understanding and interceding for his people. His example teaches us the power of prayer. When we face tough questions, do we turn to God with the same level of intensity? Daniel also received visions about the end times, including the rise of the Antichrist and the Great Tribulation. While these revelations are profound and sometimes unsettling, they're also a reminder that God has a plan. He doesn't just know the future, he controls it. That truth gives us peace in life's uncertainties. What's most remarkable is, that even after receiving all these visions, Daniel remained humble. He acknowledged that the understanding came from God, not from himself. His humility is a powerful example for us. When we're gifted with talents or achievements, do we use them to glorify God or to elevate ourselves? Daniel's visions also show us that God cares about the details. He didn't just reveal sweeping historical events. He also included precise details that were fulfilled with astonishing accuracy. This reminds us that God isn't just overseeing the big picture. He's also attentive to the small things in our lives. He cares about every detail, even those that seem insignificant to us. Ultimately, Daniel's visions invite us to look to the future with hope and confidence. They remind us that no matter how chaotic the world may seem, God is in control. And this assurance gives us the strength to face today's challenges, knowing that the best is yet to come. And now, after diving into Daniel's incredible story, it's time for you to reflect. How's your life looking? Are you facing your lions with the same confidence Daniel had? Are you willing to stand firm in your values, even when the whole world seems to be pushing you to give in? Daniel's story teaches us that with faith in God, we can overcome any challenge and make an impact on those around us. So, what's your next move? How about starting to apply that unshakable confidence in your daily life? Take a moment to strengthen your faith, whether it's through reading the Bible, praying, or even small acts of obedience. Maybe it's time to face that challenge you've been avoiding, but this time, knowing you're not alone, God is with you every step of the way. And, hey, I want to hear from you. Which part of Daniel's story inspired you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going and learn together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the amazing content we've got coming your way. And check it out. There are more videos popping up on your screen right now. Click on one to keep learning about powerful Bible stories that can transform your life. See you in the next video. May God bless and protect you.